Now in Egypt, though, a bombing outside St. Mark's Cathedral, which is the home to the Egyptian Coptic community, killed at least 25 people. Egypt has also seen a wave of attacks in the last few years since a coup removed the former Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi. The current military regime is blaming, or at least sort of pointing the finger at the Muslim Brotherhood for this latest attack. But Eric, the violence and the problems in Egypt run a lot deeper than just the Muslim Brotherhood, and there is growing frustration with President Sisi, the former general who now runs Egypt, about his handling of not only the economy but also the security situation, which continues to deteriorate. Obviously, both in Egypt and Turkey, they have the same problems that we're seeing in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and a lot of other places, including here in Jerusalem as well. There is a real problem with growing violence in this region, Eric.
It is so sad and continues. Connor Powell in Jerusalem today. Thank you. Arthel?
And Eric, for more on this, let's bring in retired Navy Captain Chuck Nash, a Fox News military analyst. And Captain Nash, I want to start by getting your overview of what's going on both fronts. And then tell us more pointedly, why should Americans pay attention or care, of course, apart from the fact that no one wants to hear the sad news of innocent lives being lost?
Well, there's the innocent lives piece, but the other thing is that what we're really seeing is not only a civil war inside of Islam between the two main sects, which are the Shia and the Sunni, but we're also seeing a continuous effort to purge Christians from the Middle East and Southwest Asia. If you look at who the real refugees are, and you look at who the United States are taking, we're taking a high 90 percentage, like 97, 98% are Sunni, and about 2 to 3% are Christian. And the reason is because the Christians are trying to maintain their foothold in their locales, whereas the Sunni are trying to flee. So part of the stability issue, and it may be impossible at this point. You know, we may be so far out on the slippery slope that we can't get back. But the Christian communities are dying, they're being purged, and those that are not being killed are being forced out as much as possible, and they refuse to go to a lot of the refugee centers because most of the refugee centers are filled with Muslim refugees, and there's conflict within those centers, which is why the U.S. can't, to our credit, if you will, can't get a lot of Christian refugees because they're not in the refugee camps to start with.
Does this complicate what President Trump and his defense and State Departments and national security team will face?
I think so, Arthel, and the reason is because the Turks, who were really solid NATO allies, really solid. I've spent quite a bit of time in Turkey and dealt with the Turkish military. Now what's happened under the Erdogan regime is they're moving more toward a Sunni Islamist regime, and Erdogan and Putin have made up. You'll recall, as a matter of fact, you and I talked about it when the Turks shot down a Russian aircraft over Syria, and relations were strained between the Russians and the Turks. Well, they've since made up, and Erdogan has recently cut a deal with Putin where he could pull out a lot of his Muslim Brotherhood, the Turkish-backed Muslim Brotherhood fighters out of Aleppo, and use them to go into Turkey, to have Turkish troops come down, join with those Muslim Brotherhood militias to keep the Kurds separated so that they don't join up coming from the east and join up with their fellow Kurds to the west, which would provide almost like a constant flow right under the southern border of Turkey. Turks are not going to put up with that. The other regional allies will not put up with that. They don't want to see a unified Kurdish minority turning into a Kurdistan that has political sovereignty over that much territory. They won't put up with it.
Captain Nash, based on what you just said, pointing out how Erdogan and Putin made up, does that play in favor of President-elect Trump, who speaks of having dialogue and a relationship with Putin?
I think President-elect Trump is going to be forced into cutting a deal with the Russians. And the reason is because the Turks, it appears, are now working against the people we're supporting, which are the Kurds, and working on behalf of the interests of the Russians, not on behalf of the interests of the United States. By the same token, the Russians, Putin, is backing Assad.
Yeah.
So therefore, they have the vast majority of the ground forces and the air forces that are based in Syria working against a diminished threat, because the threat is moving, the threat against them is moving elsewhere, and our sway in backing those people is vastly diminished.
Mm-hmm. If I could get a short answer on the complicated
Sure.
question, that is, as you know, President-elect Trump has publicly dismissed the CIA reports that Russia did intentionally hack into the systems here in America to affect the outcome of the presidency, the race for president. Does that public dismissal, if you will, does that present any sort of security vulnerabilities for America?
I don't think so, because the facts aren't known. And until the facts are known, I think everybody should just back off of even talking about it, because as Ambassador Bolton just had the conversation with Eric about the potential for a false flag operation, that's very real. Blame it on somebody.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Captain Chuck Nash, thank you so much.